Today, I'm going to talk to you about a topic that's rarely talked about, personal finance. And it's something that I see all the time in my practice. It's the intersection of money and shame. And I first got interested in this topic when I read an article in 2016 by Neal Gabler in The Atlantic titled "The Secret Shame of the Middle Class." It resonated with me both professionally and personally. It resonated personally because I have to tell you, I've done some of these same things in my personal finances that my clients and prospects are often beating themselves about. It resonated personally because I get to see the inside of women's finances every single day. And I've often heard them say that they're embarrassed or ashamed of some ongoing or past problem they made with their money. So today's guest is going to talk about when she experienced what she calls the mortgage trifecta. She had to close down her business, her mortgage business. She had to do a short sale of one of her properties, do a deed in lieu of on another property, and she went through a foreclosure on the third property. All of this in really short order. Now, if you'll hear her story, you'll also know that she had just recently gotten married. She had recently had her first kid. She had recently just gotten a graduate degree. So she had a whole lot going on when she was going through this trifecta. So what we're going to talk about today is we're going to hear her story. And in addition to that, she's going to talk about how a smart, educated woman like her ever ended up in that circumstance. Because if you're ever going through it yourself, you're kind of thinking to yourself, if you're like me, you're thinking, how did I get myself here? And the reality is she's human, we're all gonna go through something. We're gonna make some mistakes. So listen all the way through to the end as she turns and talks about what she learned from her experience, how she turned around her situation, threw off the shame, and is now thriving. So Katherine, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Got it. So I'm going to start with, and I'm going to tell you right up front, this may be a little bit of a confrontational question, but the question is, now, how could somebody who is smart and educated like you make financial mistakes?
Oh, that is a good question. And that's what I was asking myself when I was going through my ordeal. But you know what? I am human. Sometimes we think we know better than we know, and you don't realize that you've gotten in over your head. And that's where I found myself. So I had gone through, the normal challenges that people go through, being a young person, getting some credit cards, in college, they were like pushing those credit cards. So I went through that normal stuff, but I had kind of gotten myself out of those things before. I had put some strategies together, had learned a few things from a few of the companies that I had worked with. So I had a good working knowledge of what I was supposed to do. But after I started doing mortgages and, everyone's like, oh, you got to own real estate. You got to buy this house. You got to do that. And I was running my own company. I had a mortgage brokerage. So I understood how to get somebody a mortgage. I understood how to get someone into a house, but how to actually manage multiple rental properties. That part I just really didn't have a good grasp of. And so I was so ashamed about that because it's like, you're in the mortgage industry, you're smart, you went to school, like what happened? But I just got overextended. I bought my first rental property and it was a good experience. I was getting the rents and all of that. And then I turned around and I bought two more.
Okay.
And that was a bad decision. And so I had 3 rental properties on top of the place that I lived in, and the market turned. Everything was red hot. Everything was going well. The little bit of money I saved up, I used on, down payments and things of that nature. And then the crash happened. So
2008 is when this affected you. Perfect.
Yes, 2008, it affected me. And so I had been running my own mortgage brokerage since 2003, and things are just chugging along. I was not a big mortgage broker, but I was doing okay for myself, and I felt like I could handle it, and I couldn't. And so once the crash started happening, I had to make the decision to close my mortgage brokerage
Okay.
because I was a very small fish in a big pond. They started changing a lot of the compliance and things of that nature for brokers. And I just knew that I wasn't going to last the way my structure was. I had just had a baby. I had
Mm.
gotten married the year before. I had graduated from my master's program the year before, and there was a lot going on in my life. And so I had to close my business. And the shame part, there was just so much shame associated with it because again, I was in the industry, and I was like, I should have known better. And then I had what I call the trifecta of what you don't want to do if you're dealing with properties. I had to do a short sale. I
Mm-hmm.
had to do a deed in lieu of foreclosure, and I
Mm-hmm.
actually had to do a foreclosure. And on top of that, I actually ended up having to file for bankruptcy. So here I am, just closed my mortgage brokerage. Thank goodness I got a decent job. It was okay. So we were able to survive, but my husband was also, he was in construction. So his money was tied to the mortgage industry. And so we were struggling. So
Got it.
that's how I ended up there.
Oh my goodness. So let's unpack this. There is a lot going on there. So you were a mortgage broker.
Mhm.
You bought your house plus three more. So you had four houses. Then we have the crash in 2008. And in 2008, things just fell apart in the mortgage industry. I've got friends in the mortgage industry, and I remember them just reeling because of the changes that came about. It seemed like almost immediately. It's just like, okay, we're not loan. It seemed like what they decided to do is we're not loaning to anybody. You know what I'm
Right,
saying?
right.
I mean, it probably wasn't true, but that's how it appeared. It's we're not loaning to anybody, and anybody who had businesses that were small, who were kind of making it, really got washed out. I mean, if you think about it, some of the major players in the mortgage
Mhm.
areas got washed out during that time frame. So what I heard you say that really just resonated with me is I'm smart, I'm educated. How could this happen to me? How come I made those mistakes? I should have known better is something that you said.
Mhm.
These are all things that I hear my clients say over and over again. And they start beating themselves up about something that happened outside of their own personal accountability, if you will.
Mhm.
I mean, you can't, nobody, I mean, there are people who will say that they knew that the industry was going to shift, but nobody knew the industry was going to shift that fast. Nobody knew how the shift was going to happen. And you just got caught up in that. So
Yep.
you are really just so much like so many of the clients that I work with. And I really just have to commend you because I know that it was a trying time. You had just bought a house, you had just gotten married, you had just had a kid, and then you had the trifecta in your business. So that, I mean, my goodness. Talk about, is there anything in particular that you said to yourself about that? Because I think that there's a, if you will, there's a mindset sometimes that contributes to us getting in those situations. And I'm not saying that's necessarily true for you. And then
Mhm.
there's a mindset that you adopt that gets you out of that. So let's talk
Mhm.
about that.
Okay. Okay. Well, the getting into those situations, I just thought I could handle it. I thought that everything would be okay. Everything had been going along, everything was, working.
Yeah.
So I thought, okay, it's going to continue to go like this. And even though I had a good sense of saving and things like that. I just, all of that, when you have that much responsibility and you're expecting that the renters are going to be able to pay and they can't, and then you can't, then that just causes a domino effect. And so that was kind of my mindset, was like, okay, people have been doing this for years. There was some advice that I took that wasn't the best. But that's how I got in. How I got out was me just kind of, it was devastating for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was embarrassed. I
Yeah.
didn't want to say anything to anyone because, again, I should have known better. That's what I kept saying to myself. But you know what? I had a family, I had a baby, and kind of that, oh, okay, well, we got to we got to work our way out of this. And so I just kind of, settled down after a while, because I probably took like a month or two when everything was happening, to just be in it. And it didn't feel good and it was hard, but I was just in it. And then I said, but you know what? Especially thinking about that bankruptcy, that just used to irk me, because I knew, dealing with mortgages, how long that stuff stays on your credit and how
Right.
long it affects you. And I remember thinking, dang, I'm going to be 40 something years old by the time, this falls off. And gosh, it just felt like it was so far down the road. But I was able to kind of get myself together. I was able to, do more study, find out what I needed to do to get out of those situations.
So
And
give me some, for
just
instances. Talk to me about
uh,
the specifics, because there's somebody who is listening today who needs
mhm.
to hear what you're going to say to her. So speak
Okay.
to her.
Okay, I will speak to her. And one of the things I'll say first, though, is I was so ashamed and just whispering and like, oh, I was so scared to tell people. And then finally, when I started talking about what I was going through,
Yeah.
and other people were whispering back, like, oh, I went through that too. And it's like, okay, so we need to stop whispering.
Yeah.
Okay. And we need to start talking about what happened so that we can help other people. And
Yeah.
so I'm always the kind of person that I like to try to go through it myself before
Yeah.
I tell other people, because I don't want to steer them in, the wrong direction. And so for me, I knew enough about the mortgage industry, which some people maybe didn't know, is I knew what a deed in lieu of foreclosure was. I knew how that was going to affect me. I knew what obviously a foreclosure was, and I knew what a short sale was, and I knew how it worked. And so I knew that those were options that I had, that some people really didn't know. Some people were just like, I'm walking away from this, let them foreclose on me. I don't care what happens. But I talked to the lenders. I talked to every single one of them. I had renters. I had to get them prepared for what was getting ready to happen, because that was affecting their lives too. So
Yeah.
I knew what the process was. The places when I didn't know the process, I got the information. For instance, one of my renters in the county we were in, I got all the details on what was going to happen and how long it was going to take. And so I gave them all of that information. This is what's happening to me. I know this affects you. This is how much time you have. I even, for me, because I, was just feeling bad, I was like, you don't have to worry about, your last month's rent. Use that for your security deposit for the next property you have to get, because you can't stay here. So I am a very kind of step-by-step kind of person. And so I just found out the steps that I needed to take to get myself at least relieved of those properties. And to be honest, it was a blessing for me, because I know that there were people who tried to hang on for so long. And I understand that. But a lot of people lost even more money than they had to lose had they just said, you know what, I'm going to cut my loss and I'm going to get out of this. And so that's what I did. So I talked to the lenders. I studied up on the options that I had. I figured out, what I needed to do. I know I'm not being real specific. That's, guys, it's been over 10 years now. But I just kind of went step by step, and we just slowly but surely, got ourselves out. I made sure I was fiercely protective of my credit once I got everything, because with credit, as you know, and your listeners may know, you need time away from the negative event, right? So the trifecta was happening. I let everything happen during that trifecta time. And once I could see I was getting out of that, I was fiercely protective of my credit after that, because I wanted the time away from the negative event. Because even with all of that, you can still recover, get out of it. And so my credit score was probably like in the mid probably about 750 when all of this happened. And then that was, in the time when, you could just spell FHA and they gave you a loan. So, it was those no income, no asset. It just didn't matter. As long as you could sign on the dotted line, you could have a house. And so that's where my credit score was. My credit score went down to like the low 500s. And just slowly but surely I built it back up. And so now I'm in the 800 range. Again, that's time, that's intention about, again, being fierce about protecting my credit, and just going through the steps, because not everything is going to be a quick fix. It's going to take some time, and I was willing to take that time and learn as much as I could while I was taking that time, and able to share my experience with others coming out of it.
Thank you so much, Katherine. That is so helpful. I'm going to ask you, first and foremost, I just want to thank you for sharing your story so far. That has been tremendous. So if there's somebody out there who is a listener, who is listening in, what is a deed in lieu of
foreclosure?
Foreclosure. Tell me what that is. Somebody needs to hear that.
So, when you get a mortgage, you have a deed, right? Or like your title and all that kind of stuff. And so what that says is, instead of you foreclosing on me, I'm going to just give you your deed back. So I have the deed when I buy the house, but I'm saying, you know what, I can't handle this house anymore. Instead of going through the money that it costs for you to file a foreclosure and us to go through the county and all of that kind of stuff, we're not going to go through all that. I'm going to just give you your deed back, and you will not foreclose on me. So it forgives the loan, everything. It's just kind of like an even trade. Here you go. You take it back. And it affects your credit a similar way that a foreclosure would. However, you don't have to go through that whole foreclosure process. And then two, sometimes with the foreclosure, there may be still a balance that you have to deal with after the fact. With a deed in lieu of foreclosure, at least the one that I did and the way they were handling it before, they basically forgave those funds, and I didn't have to pay them back.
Wow, that's a great thing. So if somebody was kind of going through that struggle right now, that might be an option for them to consider, rather than continuing to put money into, wherever you're putting money into, if you're continuing to try and paying on your own. And how is that different from a short sale? I'm familiar with the short sale.
A short sale is, so I owe the bank $150,000.
Okay.
But the house, the value of the house, and this is true, let me tell you what happened. So I had a loan. I think I still owed about $140,000 on the loan. The house at the time during the crash was only appraising at $40,000.
Wow.
Okay. So I was over $100,000 underwater, as they call it, for a property that was only worth $40,000. So you go to the bank and you say, listen, they do their due diligence too, to make sure the property is only worth what you're saying it's worth. And then they make a decision. They have to agree to do that, because they are in turn trying to recoup, they've given you this money and now they're going to lose all of that. So they have to agree. But during that time, the market was just so crazy. They were willing to do short sales quite often, and they were willing to do deed in lieu of foreclosures. In the housing market, the way it is now, I'm not sure that they would be as willing, but it's something that you still definitely want to check into. And so basically the short sale was they agreed to sell my house for, I think, when I think about it, it just makes me like, I think he got that house for $37,000.
The next person?
The person who bought my house, because the short sale is like, it's like a purchase almost. And they're saying, yes, we'll let you sell it for less than it's worth. You sell it for the 37,000, and then you don't have to pay us this other money back. And there still was something I had to do as far as the paying the money back. Again, there was a program or something where I didn't.
There was a program at the time, yes.
Yeah, I didn't have to pay that money back. And so he purchased my house that I owed $140,000 on for like $37,000. But again, I didn't have to deal with all of that money. I didn't have to deal with trying to pay all of that money back. And so for me, it was actually a blessing. Even though I was devastated going through it, I knew enough to know that those options were there for me. And then on one, the lender was not willing to do the deed in lieu or the short sale. They were like, nope, we're going to foreclose. And I think they actually lost money doing that, but it was like, okay, so that's what we did.
All right. Wow. That was a time. And, I have to tell you that I bought my house around that same time out in New Jersey. And we bought it for $450, no. We bought it for $550. And again, those were some really crazy times. It seemed like 6 months later, my house was underwater about $60,000-$70,000. And you're just like, what the happened? I'm sitting here, me and my husband were like, we're smart people. How could this have happened to us? And it just seemed like on a dime, things just really turned around. So
very quickly.
And we went through the short sale process.
Okay.
And I remember like the first person who made an offer on our house, they knew that we were moving and they just offered us a ridiculous amount of money. I mean, it was just ridiculous. And I was just like, you know what? I'll just deal with the bankruptcy. Now, what that person didn't know that I knew is that I'm in the financial services industry. I can't have a bankruptcy in my house. That is not, I wouldn't be able to work in my industry. But I was just like, just tell him to go away. And we ended up getting, whatever the house was, whatever
the market value at the time.
The next person paid that, and it was just like, and my bank agreed to it, and we were able to kind of walk away from it. And again, that was when they were having that great program where instead of having to pay the taxes on the difference between what you bought it at and
that's right,
you were able to kind of walk away from that. And so I was just like telling my husband, this is a great deal, and this is probably a once in a lifetime deal.
This time we're going to make the smart decision, right?
Absolutely, we're going to make the smart decision. I was just like, because these things don't happen that often, and we are lucky to take advantage of it. And my husband is an engineer, so he's going to kind of research it. I was just like, look, I'm telling you, we're taking it. It doesn't really matter what your little research is going to do. And he did his little research. He goes, oh, that's a very good deal. I was just like, I told you that 2 weeks ago, but you had to research it. And so he researched it, and that's, sometimes that's just marriage. So if somebody was in a similar situation right now, what would you tell them about what you were going through, what you've learned about it, what their options are? What are you talking about? And I think you were talking about the importance of, if you will, biting into the bad apple and then moving on.
Yeah. Just kind of, you have to, you can wallow in it. And I think I think sometimes we're scared to face it. I know I was. I remember like 2 weeks to a month before I knew it was all coming crashing down. I was just a wreck, and my heart was always beating really fast, and I just was not well, and I, like I said, I had had a baby, and so I was like, I can't, I can't be going through this. My child needs me here fully present.
Right.
And so I had to just feel those feelings,
Yeah.
whatever they were, if they were shame, if they were doubt, if they were sadness, I just felt those feelings. And then I just kind of dusted myself off and I said, let's make the best decision I can make now. And so that's what I did. So yeah, it was I bit into that apple, but it was I think I came out better for it. I know of several people who lost their savings. I knew of several people trying to save houses, and it was like, let it go, let it go. And so sometimes we have to face our fear. We make one bad decision and then we continue to make bad decisions. But for me, I was like, I know I don't like debt. And so having hundreds of thousands of dollars hanging over me, that was going to be a poor quality of life for me
Yeah.
mentally. And
Mhm.
so, like I said, I just bit that bullet, and I think I'm better for it, though. Definitely think I'm better for it.
Perfect. So how did you then recover? I mean, so you said that you were really focused on after you took the hit, really
Mhm.
starting to be intentional about building your credit. So what sorts of
Yes.
steps did you take as far as that's concerned?
Well, and I know this can be, people have very varied opinions about this, but this is the route that I took. So I went ahead and got a credit card. One of the few companies that would allow me to have a credit card. I will say their name, or they're not paying me. I wish they were. If you want to pay me, please do. Was Capital One. They
Okay.
offered me a credit card. And I knew that my goal for that card was to help rebuild and reestablish my credit. And so I got the card and I just made sure that when I used it, I paid it off at the end of every month.
Mhm.
Um, any other items that I had that would affect my credit. So during that time, I still had a student loan. So I made sure that the student loan was paid on time. I think when it first started, I still had my car. And so I was making sure all the stuff that hits your credit, right?
Yeah.
Anything that, if there was anything that was going to have to be late, I was trying to make it something that would not affect my credit.
Okay.
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 So it was like, if I have to not pay something, then let it be something that's not going to hit my credit report.
Okay.
So I made sure I paid that car payment on time. I made sure that I paid my student loan on time, and I paid that credit card on time. I worked to try to get my income up so that I could pay off more debt. And so then so while I'm, getting my credit built up, I'm also saving money. Again, there are people who have differing opinions on how you should do that. Some say, you only you save first and then you pay off debt. Some say you pay off debt first, then you save. For me, it made more sense to me. At one time, the only saving I was doing was in my 401k. That's all I could afford to save. I didn't have enough money to like put away. And so for probably like 6 months to a year, that was really the only savings I had because my income had dropped. And then, like I said, my husband was also sporadically working. But it was kind of like slowly but surely, I made sure I paid everything on time. And then when I was able to start saving, I started putting away $25 a month and started saving that way. And anytime I got a raise or any type of windfall. At the time I broke, and I've done all different kinds of things, but at the time I was like, if I get a windfall, I'm a tither, so I would pay my tithes. I would do a third to my tithes. I would do a third to paying off debt, and I would save a third. And I did that for quite a bit of time. And I've changed strategies since then, but that's what I did. I did a third, and a third. And slowly but surely, with the money that I was saving, and whenever I would get, because then I still used to get tax returns, refunds. And so my tax refund, I was intentional. It had a purpose. And so every time I got a tax refund, it was like, okay, if I could pay something off, I would pay it off. If I needed to pay something down, I would pay it down. And then I would put a chunk of that in my savings. Because actually, that's how I saved enough money to start my mortgage brokerage. My business was from 2 or 3 years of tax returns that I saved to start my business. And so I knew that worked for me, and I just had a different purpose for it this time. And so again, slowly but surely, I just started, doing little things like that. And my income began to increase over time, thank goodness. And so I was able to do more. And so I have paid off my student loans. And I even had I had a layoff. 3 years after that, I had a layoff, and I was laid off for 6 months. And so I had started a master's program. And so the student loans actually helped me for a little bit until I could find something. And so I had almost had them paid off. And then I got more because I was like, well, I'm not working. I may as well go back to school. So anyway, I was able to finally pay off those student loans. And I was finally able to pay off the credit card debt. So now any credit card debt that I have is strategic debt. Right? So I'm using it, paying it off in 30 days, that kind of stuff. So just really putting the strategies together that I learned. And some of the stuff like one time I thought I had created something that no one else had thought of. I was like, this is brilliant. Because I remember, and it's funny, I'm weird like that. I think about like, how can I do this better? How can I do, make money better? How can I save money? And I remember thinking I had credit cards, and I would always get these offers about for 1 year, no interest, right? And if you transfer your balance, then you could do it with no interest. And I remember it was so funny. I was laying on my bed, and I sat up in my bed, and I was like, oh my God. If I go ahead and transfer this balance, I have a year with no interest, and I just really, put my money towards this, I could pay a whole lot off. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm brilliant. And then I realized, oh no, that's a strategy that that other people use. But truly, it came to me on my own. But I was like, oh, people have been doing that for years. But at the time, I didn't know that, but I was like, okay, all right, this works for me. So it's just things like that. And then I'm a person, I feel like it's a blessing to be able to pay your bills. So every month when I pay my bills, I don't think of it as like, oh my gosh, now I got to pay my bills. I'm grateful. I'm like, God, thank you so much for having the ability to pay these bills and to pay them and not have to struggle. And so when I pay my bills, I'm happy. I created my own spreadsheet. I just made it easier for me to reach the goals that I wanted to reach. So first, my first thing that I had was a legal size paper with a ruler and a line. And I made my own columns, and every month I paid stuff off. And some of that I did in the earlier days, even before all of this happened. So I've just always been a person who I like to think about it. People are like, oh my God, you like to talk about that stuff? Yes, I don't know. I just do. So it's just been really something that I've learned a lot from. And so just from what I've learned and what I've done in my life, then I was like, well, I can give this back. So that's what I do too at my church. I'm an associate pastor And I also give that back at my church and to the youth. And sometimes I do also counsel people. So
Got it.
coach, yeah.
Got it. So Katherine, you were just talking about the youth and how you were taking the information and knowledge that you've learned over this time period from your industry and from your experience, and you're talking about putting in educational programs into your church, as well as your talking to youth about it. Tell me a little bit more about that, would you please?
Sure. So at my church, I started, my church is called Liberty Community Church, and I started a financial education program. So for the adults and for the kids. And so we're doing financial literacy programming, teaching people how to budget, how to save, how to eliminate debt, and start investing. And so one of the things I've done in the past is I used to have a Series 6 and 63 license, which allows you to do mutual funds and life insurance. And I never did the Series 7 because I was always so scared, like, oh, that's the stock market. It's just too, I can't understand that. But I have invested in myself, taken some coaching. I personally do some active trading, but I wanted the kids to know early about financial literacy and investing, the long-term, type of investing. And so I said, you know what, whatever I learn, I'm going to make sure that they know, so that it's something that will become a life skill for them, something that they just know how to do and not have to wait until they're, 30, 40, 50 to learn. And so that's what I do with them. So we have the financial literacy courses, and then I have an investment club for those kids who are who want to learn how to invest. And so we meet monthly, and we study stocks, and they make trades. We do it in a simulated trader, of course. But we have a really good program that's coming up that I hope to share in more detail, maybe at another time with you, because we're getting it together. But it's a really good program for the kids so that they can learn how to invest and have something to take with them after they leave the program. So I'm really excited about that.
Well, I am really excited about that. I used to teach courses in a town called East Palo Alto, which is right next to Stanford. And I used to teach the kids in a church program there. And I know that they were like sponges for this information. And they would go home and talk to their parents about what they had learned. And then their parents were like, can't you teach me something like that? Because, so many of us were never taught this stuff. And
right.
So, one of the reasons why I have Her Money Story in place is so that people like yourselves can tell your money stories, so that people can be inspired and just realize there's great information out there. There's people out there. I love the fact that you've got that. I'm going to, remind me after this is over to tell you about some upcoming programs that we've got coming up.
Oh, okay.
That you and your community would love to do. They're all free of charge, but definitely want to talk to you about that. But now we're coming to the end. I'm sad about that, but we're coming to the end. And I just want to ask you 2 questions. First and foremost, one of the things that people who are listening to this podcast are often very interested in is they're very interested in financial freedom. So talk to me about what's financial freedom mean to you, Katherine?
And I know that financial freedom means different things to different people.
Yeah.
For me, financial freedom would be me having the ability to do what I need to do what I want to do the things that I'm passionate about, without money being a hindrance or a blockage. So if that means that, I want to go to South Africa in a month and take my children with me, then I can do that. I don't have to ask a employer, can I have this many days off so that I can go take this trip? Or my daughter is into sports and I feel like she's going to really, to grow and develop, and I'm going to want to go see her play, and I'm not going to want to have anyone tell me, sorry, no, you can't go, you don't have the time off, that kind of thing. So that's what financial freedom means to me, the ability to do what I have to do and what I want to do and what I'm passionate about without money being a hindrance at all, without even having to be, having to care about that.
Absolutely. I love that. So let me just ask you a fun question as we're coming to the end. Is there a song, Katherine, that is the anthem for where you are financially?
I would say this is a song that is where I am financially, where I am in my life.
Okay.
And it's an older song. It's from India.Arie, who I love so, so very much. And it's a song called I Choose. And the chorus of the song says, I choose to be the best that I can be. I choose to be authentic. And then one verse says, and courageous in everything I do. The past doesn't dictate who I am. I choose. And so even though we are absolutely informed by our past, it does not have to dictate where we go. So if there were some negative things in our past, like the experiences that I had, I could have stayed there, but I chose to move forward. And so I like that in just me, in career choices and additional side hustles that I have, in the way that I want my children to learn about money. I choose to be the best that I can be. I make those decisions, and I choose to move forward and be authentic and courageous in the steps that I'm taking. So India.Arie, I choose.
I love that. I absolutely love that. So if people wanted to listen, I know that you have your own podcast, and listeners, it's a fantastic podcast. It's called Finance and Affirmations. If people wanted to listen to that particular podcast, where could they listen to your podcast or follow you on social media?
So you can listen to the Finance and Affirmations podcast anywhere you get your podcast, on Apple, Spotify, I think Google, and even Audible. You can listen on Audible. You can actually also listen on Facebook. And then if you want to follow me, I'm at Finance and Affirmations. So that's Finance ampersand Affirmations on Facebook. On Instagram, I'm at Finance AND Affirmations on Instagram. If you want to follow me, please follow, click, listen, share. And just a little about it, it's just having conversations. I believe that finance and affirmations affect every aspect of our lives. And so we have conversations about finances and affirmations. And then I do one segment called Finance in 5. It's one financial topic in 5 minutes or less. So I alternate weeks with the conversations and or the Finance in 5.
All right.
And I believe it's episode 18 that Miss Felicia Gopaul, certified financial planner, was a guest on my podcast. So if nothing else, please make sure you check that episode out. It's really good.
Absolutely. So thank you so much for being here and being with us. Thank you for being vulnerable enough to share what you had been through and the lessons that you learned. I am, as if I don't, I certainly had not heard of deed in lieu of foreclosure when I was kind of going through what I was going through. Bankruptcy was not an option. So short sale was the only thing, but it took, I think, 3 times before my mortgage broker, my mortgage company would even listen to that conversation. They were, for whatever reason, really focused on foreclosing. I was just like, no. So, it was a trying time. And I love the lessons that you learned out of it. And I hope that my listeners today were as blessed as I was by you being here. So thank you again.
Thank you. It was a pleasure, and blessings to you and all of your listeners.
So thank you for tuning into the Her Money Story podcast. For more episodes like this, go to my YouTube channel, click the subscribe button, and ring the bell to ensure that you are notified whenever new content comes out. And if you're listening to an audio version of this podcast, please share an honest review on Apple, because more reviews means more awareness of the Her Money Story podcast. And if you are a motivated, educated, professional, entrepreneurial woman who wants personalized attention to your wealth building efforts, visit www.chatwithfelicia to get on my calendar to see if we're a fit to work together. Tell me a little bit about who you are and where you are financially and what you'd like to work on together. And I'll see you soon on my calendar. That's it for now. See you next week.